Yay Networks.
When I was texting you about episode ideas, you didn't respond, and so
No, I thought we were going to do that other one. You had already talked about that. I felt like that was...
Which one?
Your 1 year...
But you didn't respond, and so then I was like,
No, I
okay,
already
I don't
expected
think he
that
cares.
was good.
But you didn't respond. You didn't say anything.
Yeah, you just got to know now that means that's good.
No.
Okay, good.
That means I don't have time for this. So I'm like, okay, I'll just figure out.
No,
my own
at the
shit.
time I did not have
So
time for this.
then
I was like, yeah, that
My
works.
executive decision is, this is my idea. This is what we're doing.
I'm leaving all this in, by the way.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
That's
great.
good.
This could be cut in and then
How the sausage gets cut.
Gross. Why'd you have to put the vein in it? Nobody's gonna know what that means.
Okay, so what are we talking about today?
So I have no
Dysautonomia.
Dysautonomia. We are going to talk about dysautonomia. A very popular topic apparently now on the internets. What you don't know, this is just a little behind the scenes look for everyone that's listening, because this is sort of, we just started without starting, which means at the end we'll probably have to do an intro. Which, you know what,
Don't
for the
worry,
next
Big
episode,
Daddy-
since I don't know,
Big Daddy Garrett will bake it in.
he'll figure it out and he'll make it work.
That's lingo, podcast lingo for all of you
Yes.
that don't know. I learned it
That's podcast lingo.
a lot. All when we have our sponsors, we bake them in
Listen,
like a cake.
we've been doing this for like over a year now. We're semi-professional, I guess. You could say we got signed. It's no big deal. It's kind of... No.
We got
I'm
some
like,
checks. We cashed some checks.
It's funny because I do this to you. So Alex, sometimes on podcasts, we come up with the ideas and the things that we want to talk about. And what I will do is sometimes I will just throw something in and I'm like, oh, hey, and I also have a little thing, or I want to talk about something.
It's usually about sex.
It is. I am the sex advocate of this podcast. And just for people in general.
Don't throw me out there like that. I also advocate for good sex. You just like to talk about it.
I just talk about it more to bring it up.
Every episode.
Listen, it's something that everyone thinks about, yet nobody wants to talk about. I want to get into the things that nobody wants to talk about, but I also want it to be okay to talk about it. I want it to be a topic that we can actually bring into the science that we talk about, the woo-woo-ness that we talk about of this. I want it to have all the aspects.
Defend your love for talking about sex. It's okay. I'm in your corner, friend.
So dysautonomia, this is actually something that I get asked pretty regularly on my TikTok page. I'll get questions about it. And I feel like for me, I'm just always like, well, yeah, duh. Hey, have you heard about this? Have you seen anything? And I'm like, well, yeah, I work with I have to be careful. I was talking to Sarah about this the other day.
Dr. Sarah,
Dr. Sarah,
associates.
who works with me.
Associate docs.
I told her, like, you have to be very careful of not getting worn out on your message because you share it every single day, 1,000 times a day, all the time. And you're like,
yeah,
don't you know this by now? It's like, because I know this at a crazy level. And it's like, that's not the case for everyone. They've got lives. They've got things going on. They've got other stuff. So they're not as focused on what it is that you're talking about.
it's kind of like what we were talking about before we recorded, where your toddler, they want to show you the same thing 50 million times because it's new to them every
watch
time.
it
Or
50
they
million
discovered
times.
one new little fact about something and they can't wait to tell you about it. Right? And
Yes, that is my oldest. She loves to teach right now on all the things that she's like. She's fascinated.
And Georgia, she will take everything, like all of these things, all of her little blocks, she'll take them out of a container and then she'll just put them back in the container. And then she'll move the container and then she'll take them all out of the container. Then she'll put them back in the container. Just like and when reading about it, like what developmental phase she's at, it's like the one time she does it is like the first time. Every time she does it is like the first time, and that's how she's learning. And so I think about that, and I think about people, because dysautonomia is kind of a big sciencey word. We're going to break it down. But when people, right, we start having health stuff, and then we start trying to get down to the root of it. And in science today and in medicine, it is fortunately for us, I like the way this is going, but it is the nervous system, figuring out the root cause of issues and not just throwing a lotion potion or drug at it is becoming more popular. And I think that's great. And I think that's why words like dysautonomia are popping up because, I mean, you can tell us what that is, Brandon.
Well, so it's interesting because you talk about like there is an aspect where I do love the direction that we're going, and there's an aspect where I don't love it because I feel like people who don't know jack about something are just trying to figure out like, oh great, because now there's going to be another line of solutions that come out that we start trying, or we start testing out something that was really meant for something else on stuff like this, when what I would prefer is that we figure out a way that we all work together for the betterment of the patient. I talked about this the other day on a TikTok live, and I was just, it resonated with so many people. I watched them commenting about it. It's like, I don't care what type of doctor you are. I obviously want to understand your approach and why you do things that way, and why do you use that blood test instead of this, or why do you do a swab instead of this, and why do you use functional nervous system testing instead of just your hands, or whatever it is. But I want us to not work off of old information. Like I've actually been going back through some old clips to have content in order to be able to post, and I was looking at one of our old episodes where we talk about, we like to hold space for the ability to change our thoughts, ideas, and opinions around things with new information. That doesn't make me a hypocrite. And, we're definitely people who get thrown into this a lot because we're chiropractors. So in chiropractic, there is an idea that people have of what that is, and it gets put in a box. And unfortunately for some people, it's not a good one. They were mistreated or even somebody that they know, they weren't even treated that way. It was this way. And then,
or we just have preconceived ideas, right?
Well, and it's, back in the day, the medical doctors and chiropractors used to fight with each other. And so now I feel like it's, the old heads here and the old heads here passed it down, and it's like, y'all have to fight one another. And I'm like, why do we have to fight one another? Like, fuck what you guys were doing. Why can't we sit here and go, well, if this should really be about getting patients healthier and meeting the needs that they're looking for, why they sought us out and why they're trying to work with us, I think we could exponentially create change when it comes to healthcare if we would focus specifically around what is the problem, who is the specialist for that problem, and then what can we do either working together or making sure that they get connected with the right person. And the reason I want to talk about dysautonomia, you guys know, welcome back. It's another episode where guess what? We're going to talk about the nervous system again over and over again. And hopefully you will understand and get that point. But I didn't know this was such a big thing. I didn't know this is starting to be more. I just didn't know. Listen, I get stuck in my migraine world. And I feel like this is a little bit more of like a newer diagnosis. And I feel like it's one of those where they're really just trying to figure out a name that they can put to an issue that they can't quite figure out. Because in my research, there's like 3 different types that you're looking at whenever we're talking about dysautonomia. So basically, dysautonomia is just dysfunction within your autonomic nervous system. Yeah. So before I get into the types, let me break that down. So
I was going to say, I want to break down the word and just the diagnosis. And you just did. Yeah, it's dysregulation of your autonomic nervous system. What that does for your body is that regulates every single process going on in your body that you aren't conscious of. So breathing, your rate of cardiac output, how your heart's beating, your blood pressure, your digestion, sweating, your bladder, right? Taking nutrients out of your body, all that sort of stuff is your autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, so I was if you're new to this, we could just kind of break it down. It's like we talk about autonomic nervous system. You hear everybody talk about parasympathetic and sympathetic function. It's all under one system.
Or the fight or flight.
Yeah.
And rest and digest.
Which we had a whole episode about that. You guys can go listen to it.
We have lots of episodes.
Every episode is about this, let's be honest. But it's, when you're talking about that system, we break it up in parts in order to understand it better. But it's all one system that is coordinating and controlling certain functions. When we talk about your autonomic, there's the sympathetic side and the parasympathetic side, and they're basically acting on the same things. Like I have a whole list here. Sympathetic for the eyes is dilated pupils. Parasympathetic is constricted pupils. Parasympathetic stimulates salivation because we're talking about eating and breaking down food. Sympathetic inhibits that. Sympathetic has bronchial dilation, meaning it opens up the bronchioles in your lungs so that you can get more air in because you're stressed and we need more oxygen. The other side constricts them. We don't need as much, so we're not as open when it comes to that. Parasympathetic stimulates digestion. The other one inhibits it. Parasympathetic stimulates your gallbladder. The other one inhibits it. Like you talked about, contracts your bladder. Parasympathetic relaxes your rectum. So,
Yeah. Got to feel safe and secure in order to go poopy.
yeah, just listen, hey, just relax. And then because we already talked about it, we can't not. Parasympathetic function actually controls vaginal lubrication and erection, according to this.
So got to feel safe and
just saying.
secure to
And then
have
sympathetic
Brandon's
is
favorite pastime.
orgasm and ejaculation. So just saying.
I think
My favorite pastime. It's America's favorite pastime, okay?
the easiest way to think about it is whenever you are in fight or flight, meaning shit just happened and I gotta decide, am I gonna stay here and post up or am I gonna like go run and hide, right? So what happens in today's world? It's like, oh my gosh, I almost just got in a car accident. What do you feel? You start sweating, your eyes are dilated, you have massive mental clarity because you have to make snap quick decisions. All your blood goes to your limbs, your legs, your arms so that you can fight or run away, and we lose. It doesn't go to your gut, right? Because you don't need to process food when you're fighting for your survival.
Mm-hmm. Some people even talk about throwing up because your body goes, I don't need this in here anymore. So it goes, get it out and let's go. So you talk about getting that stress and getting that response. It's like your body goes, what do we need to do in order to get like, you have to realize the internal system. I think of Inside Out, the movie where you have like the little thing. It's like, basically that's what's going on. My eyes, and what you have to realize is perception is reality. So think about when it's dark outside and you're like, is that some dude in a cloak with a knife and a hatchet and an AK-47? Oh no, it's just a trash can. Whoops! Like
it's a bush.
But you have to realize your body already starts to go on alert, and you can probably see those things start to ramp up. So the perception creates the reality, and then kicks in this response that your body has. So it's like you have those little people in the movie Inside Out, and they're like, oh shit, this is what's going on. And so we have to kick these things in. I don't need to be digesting food right now. Breaking down things in order to, we don't need that. So get rid of it. Get rid of this. Like, we don't need any of those things for this function. So it's trying to really regulate based off of what is the response that I'm getting.
And the problem with, the problem with dysautonomia, so we're talking about the autonomic system is this big umbrella for these fight or flight and the rest and digest. And the problem with it is so these systems, they have independent functions, except for our vital things that we need in order to live and survive. These systems have to work together. So like what Brandon was talking about, fight or flight dilates your bronchioles or your lungs, right? Whereas rest and digest, parasympathetic, inhibits that. So they're not dilated. They're more.
I know it's funny to say constricted. It's funny to say constricted because I don't even know that I would describe it that way.
Yeah,
you still need to get air in. They're just not as open.
A level of constriction, right? So it's just like to what amount is that? And so when we're inhaling, our sympathetic system is more active. When we're exhaling, our parasympathetic system is more active. And that's why whenever you do something like if you're meditating or you're doing a body scan or you're trying to calm down, and they say focus on your exhale, right? So like, especially if you want to take like a shorter inhale, so you like, right, count to 4, hold it. That's your sympathetic fight or flight. You'll feel kind of your fight or flight, especially when you're holding that inhale. Like you can feel your body ramp up. And then when you exhale, and you count that for 7, that's your rest and digest. That's your parasympathetic, and that calms you down. And so with sex, with breathing, with
stop bringing up sex all the time. Shit.
Well, it's a very vital life force, right? We're kind of created to do these sorts of things. And so whenever both of those systems have to be active and coordinating with one another in order to do these things efficiently, in order to do these things with quality and the way our body was designed. And so whenever we have dysautonomia, meaning that system, this whole system, dys is just dys is just a prefix to that means abnormal. So this system is working abnormally. That's all that means. And so the quote unquote diagnosis can be kind of frustrating because it doesn't really tell you anything. It's just like, oh, you feel like you're about to pass out when you walk up a flight of stairs. You feel some heart palpitations. You feel like you have anxiety. You also have dizziness and fatigue. It sounds like you have dysautonomia.
Didn't we do an
And it's
episode
like,
on labels?
Great. Yeah,
Didn't
I
we?
think so. I think we talked about it.
Yeah, I was about to say, I feel like we talked about this, and it's, to me, the reason I want to talk about it, and I'm going to be doing way more stuff about this, is because of what you're talking about. It's this, for me, as a diagnosis, is so interesting because of the broad vastness of what it is that somebody can deal with and what it is that they're going through. Because
it's individual.
It's invisible, so we can't really see it. It's
yes.
mostly based on how your body is not functioning properly in certain ways. So, like I was talking earlier, there's three main types. So there's what's primary, secondary, and idiopathic. So
idiopathic, that's my favorite medical word ever.
Yeah. We
Can't
just came
wait
up
to
with
go
this
over
term.
that one.
Yeah, we just came up with this term. We call it idiopathic. And Garrett's going, that sounds like a doctor term. Wait till I tell you what it is.
You're right.
You probably already maybe can figure it out. When we're talking about primary, basically this is like familial dysautonomia. So
hereditary.
Yeah, like multiple system atrophy, pure autonomic failure, like forms of syncope amongst other ones. So primary, secondary, and then idiopathic.
Familial?
Yeah, it's like it comes from your family. So it can be like neurodegenerative type diseases that you're getting, essentially.
Like a Parkinson's.
Yep. So that's based on what I saw, I feel like that's where that's coming from. Secondary dysautonomias are experienced as a consequence of other disease processes, such as autonomic neuropathy associated with diabetes, or POTS as associated with like an autoimmune disease. So it has like these other things that are associated with it, and because of this, it creates this, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, I want to talk about that sort of stuff.
So can you explain, because I think that one's interesting. So explain why secondary is such an interesting thought process, because in my mind, the easiest way to put this is I feel like it's the dog chasing its own tail with this explanation. Because
is it the chicken or the egg?
Stop reading my mind, Alex. It's one of those where you're trying to figure out which came first. And I get it. We live in a world where you want your name tags. Give me my name tag so then I can go place to place and I can show them my name tag, and then they know what it is that I have, and then we can figure it out. My name tag says diabetes. I have diabetes. Subtext type 1. Okay, cool. We got it.
I'm going to look at the camera. I love how serious, how you were just like, you're showing it off like a star.
Because that's what you do whenever you get one of those. You're like, I have a name tag, and it's this. Hello. I don't know if you know this.
Hello.
It's like people. It's like people who proudly walk around. And I get it. I know that you want that. Especially, I'm not trying to undermine anyone who's looking for that, because I've worked with so many patients that just want answers, and a label gives them that.
Exactly. I think for so many patients that I've worked with, because you work a ton with migraine, I work a lot with kind of this area, dysautonomia, and the secondary conditions that you just mentioned.
Right.
And I think the drive for them to get the diagnosis or the label or the name tag is because honestly, it's almost like I just want to be able to show people that I'm not making this shit up.
Yep.
Like there's a name for it. It's not just in my head. I'm not being dramatic. I'm not being manipulative. Like I'm not making it up. Like this is a real thing. And look, here's my name tag. See, told you. I actually have this, and it's really hard.
And
I
love having that moment for someone, because you've probably seen this a lot. You do your first scan. We talk about functional nervous system testing that we do in our offices. You do your first scan, show it to them and explain, and you just have that look on your face. And the amount of times that I have someone just glad that they feel like they finally know something, or they break down in tears, or they just have this moment. It's like, I want for them to have it. The reason that I question only being so focused on making sure that we get that, because I know in your brain you think, well, now I know this, now I know next steps. That's not necessarily always the case.
Yes, it's a two-part thing here. That's part one. And we have to be really conscious of, we have the name tag, but it doesn't become our identity.
Correct.
And also, like you just said, it has no bearing on where to go from here, because that depends on who you're going to seek help from.
Because the situation, usually it's like, oh, now that we have this label finally, in which we realize you were mislabeled, and so because of that, we're going to now go this route. Now we got another 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year that we're going to wait to go see another specialist because, oh, we figured out that it is this. And because of that, we're going to send you there. And it's not a doctor, in my opinion, that's going to look at the function of that. We're going to try to look at how I can figure out, because I'm so smart, and I'm not talking about me. This is hypothetical. I'm so smart. I'm going to try to figure out how to manipulate your body's physiology in order to fix this issue, rather than going, there has to be a source of this, because let's say that you had a twin sister and she's perfectly healthy with none of these issues at all whatsoever. And I get it. It's hypothetical. You're like, oh, but none of these issues whatsoever. Y'all are essentially identical in your body, in everything. But you've got all these things going on. You've got dysautonomia, and we're struggling with POTS, and we've got, brain fog and irregular heartbeats, and, vasovagal syncope, where when we stand or sit, we can faint because our blood pressure can't regulate itself. And we're going through all these problems. Why is your body not functioning the way that it should be when seemingly the exact same body on the other side is perfectly fine? Mm-hmm. Like, and I get it. You're like, oh, well, it's not enough of this or not enough of these things. It's like, there's no issue with trying to make sure that we're not leaving you in pain all the time and using medications for their purpose for what I would consider most of the time a short period of time to hopefully help us change lifestyle factors and other things that would be important to do the unsexy things to regulate your health. But we don't tend to do that. We tend to just be like, here's this thing, try that, we'll figure out and see how it works. And then the 3 options that you typically always get makes you worse, and you're like, shit, that didn't work. Does no change. Or makes you better, but here's the caveat, what makes you better for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it is, and then your body's physiology naturally adapts to whatever it is that you did, and you feel like you go right back to where you were. Mm-hmm. And then that gets super frustrating, and that's why we tend to see, like I was going to ask you, you see this, and I probably see it more than I realize, but I just don't think it's the label or the title that they typically come in with. Maybe you're seeing this more of like people literally using this term. Like, what do you typically see in the office when somebody's coming in? Like, what does this typically present as? What's the story? Like, what are they usually telling you whenever they come in?
This is super, so like this is when I use the term spoony.
Spoony. Okay, so what's a spoony?
So a spoony is what the chronic health community, I have a chronic health condition, an invisible illness, right? It's all invisible.
Yeah.
So sometimes headaches and migraines can be a part of this. Usually it falls into this dysautonomia category. Mm-hmm. And it's, so spoonies, I forget who coined it. It was just somebody who was dealing with this sort of issue. But basically, a spoonie, they call themselves this because when a person wakes up every single day, we have a certain amount of spoons.
Which is so funny that it's spoons. It's interesting. I think I don't know the name.
A spoonful of energy, right? So we have a certain amount of spoons. We have a certain amount of energy every single day. And so when you're not dealing with an invisible illness or a chronic health condition,
you got 100 spoons.
You got a lot of spoons, and you don't lose as many spoons. But when you are dealing with this, taking a shower could easily take 2 spoons. Right? Mm-hmm. And then going to work could easily, if you have 10 spoons, right? Going to work will take 8 of them. So then by the time you get home, you're out of spoons. Mm-hmm. But
getting out of bed could take 4 spoons. Like, you're just like, oh.
No, for sure. And let's say you were a mom, and so you got woken up in the middle of the night, right? And so your sleep's already broken. That takes a lot of spoons. And then you have to go to work, and then you get home, and then you have to try to cook and hopefully cook a nutritious meal, because you care, you're a good mom. And so you're just trying to figure out how to do all of these sorts of things with a lack of spoons. Mm-hmm. And so that's why they call themselves spoonies, is because they are very conscious of their energy output, and they will have to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul in order to function throughout the day. So it's like, oh, I would love to go on that walk, but I can't go on that walk because then I won't be able to do pool time with my kid later. Like I'm having to choose between 2 things that I would really like to do. And I'm having to choose because I know that if I do them both, I'm going to pay for it tomorrow, and then I won't be able to do anything.
Yep.
That's how they live their whole life. And
that's essentially a spoonie. Is you'll see people talk about that, and you've seen it especially in the chronic, health community when they're struggling with something like that. And it's like, oh, I'm a spoonie. Like I've run out of spoons. I don't have them for this today.
And like you were saying, so is it the chicken or the egg, right? And you mentioned POTS, and just wanted to go over what POTS. So that's an acronym, POTS, and that stands for Positional Orthostatic Tachycardia Syndrome. Thanks. I was looking at you like,
The look on Alex's face, she's like, save me here, please. I'm like,
I got it.
I got you.
But basically, whenever you're changing positions and your heart rate goes up, you feel your heart rate increase, right? So that's why, like, I just went from sitting to standing and I feel like my heart's palpitating. Or I climbed up some stairs and my heart rate's at 130, 140, right? Like, and so it can often feel like panic. So a lot of these people dealing with dysautonomia will be like, I'm on this for anxiety. I have panic disorder. And it's like, well, do you? Or do you just have a dysregulated on an autonomic nervous system, right? So do we need to figure out anxiety, or do we need to figure out why the physiology in your body is chaotic and not working the way it was designed? And I'll say too, so it's like POTS. POTS is when the vasovagal syncope, which you mentioned, and that is when we faint. And when I was looking that up too, I found certain studies, because there's not a whole lot of research on dysautonomia. What it seems like the academic community and the science community agrees on is that it is a central nervous system disorder. And that's about it. And it's like, well, no shit. It's the autonomic nervous system.
They just don't realize the things, that can impact it, which...
They go to the third type of dysautonomia.
Yeah, which I was going to say should not be the name of the episode, but it is funny to me. It's like we got the whole kitchen sink here. We got spoons, we got pots, we've got all these things that we're talking about. I'm like, we're basically the whole kitchen sink here. So whenever we're talking about this, which don't let me forget, because you went down a whole rabbit trail, we're going to go back to what Alex typically sees these people present as, because she, like she said, is seeing more of them. Idiopathic. Basically, idiopathic dysautonomia. Idiopathic means we do not know where it comes from. It means the disease process and its origination.
Figure it out.
We can't figure it out.
It's idiopathic.
So it's idiopathic. And we have a lot of terms like this. Some of our listeners probably know about idiopathic intracranial hypertension or hypotension. Like you have these like issues with the pressure inside of my brain, or the fluid that sits around my brain and spinal cord, the cerebral spinal fluid that we talk about. The flow of that is off. It's either increased or decreased, or I'm having an issue with that. But if you realize what I said there, it's idiopathic, meaning we don't know. Intracranial, meaning it's in your head, and it's hypertension or hypotension.
We're just going to describe what's happening, what we're seeing, not what's happening, but we're just going to describe.
IIH. Cool. What does that mean? I'm now an acronym. Hi, I'm IIH. What does that mean? And the reason I want to talk about this is because I see people ask me, what about this? Or how does this relate? Or, I have IIH along with Chiari malformation, along with migraines, along with trigeminal neuralgia, along with vasovagal syncope. Like I just have all this neurological shitstorm of stuff going on, and I can't figure it out. And it's frustrating. So I'm going to it right back over to you about like whenever these people typically show up, like, is there a presentation that you usually see? I know we talk about like the combo of these things. I'm sure it's a lot of these, but like, how do these people typically find you? What does that like whole process look like for them?
Oh, that's a curveball. So I feel like it's a loaded question. I'm going to try to be very concise. They typically find me the same reason a migraine person would find you, right? It's like, oh, I've never had a functional nervous system test before. I know I have this, and this. I've been to a bunch of doctors. They typically send me their paperwork that they bring to every doctor, which is a novel at this point, because they have either a bunch of name tags, a bunch of diagnoses, or misdiagnoses.
Would it help if I bring you all my MRIs, my CTs, the reports, the other doctors that I've seen,
all that stuff,
the blood work that I got over the last 10 years, my dog's information, it's just all the things in there. And I get it, because you're like, help me figure this out. Here's all the information that I could ever give you that I've gathered up over all these years of trying to figure this out.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is, like you said, is it the chicken or the egg? And so everybody agrees it's a central nervous system problem. And the best way our medical community knows how to deal with that is to prescribe drugs, right? So things to bring your heart rate down, things to decrease your anxiety, things to make you, feel a certain way.
Which makes me hella nervous. If you're
better.
already having issues regulating, we're going to give you something that could get in the way of that regulation and drop it too low or bring it to it's.
There was this study I saw. I looked at one talked about long COVID and how because fatigue is a really big symptom here, and it was looking at like mitochondrial function, and so we know if our mitochondria, it's powerhouses of your cell. Think of like eighth grade biology.
Oh my gosh, sorry, I love that. There's like a meme, and it's like, do you know how to do your taxes? No, but I do know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and it's like, shit. Damn it! Like, nope, don't know how to submit things when it comes to this. Do you know how to do laundry? No, but I do know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
Anyway,
can you also, before you go into that, explain long COVID? Like, do you have a little bit of an explanation of that or like a definition of that? If not, I'll look it up.
Long COVID, yeah. So COVID, right? If you got COVID, I don't think I need to explain that to anybody. We all kind of know, most of us, I think, have gotten COVID.
I'm just making sure. You also could have just said, hey, it's COVID, but long. That would have sufficed.
So long COVID is like, I don't have I'm functional, right? Like I don't have the typical, I'm not sick like I was.
You're not bedridden, basically.
What I'm dealing with is sustained fatigue, dizziness, sometimes my taste and smell. Like I know somebody, their taste and smell is still not what it was. So I'm still dealing with these I'm fatigued. I don't feel good. I don't feel right. I feel sick. I feel dizzy. My appetite's off. And that's what they're calling long COVID. And it's enough people to where they're doing research about it.
Damn.
Right. And so interestingly enough, it was saying dysautonomia may explain the persistent symptoms observed in long COVID-19 patients, such as fatigue and hypoxia, meaning we don't have our blood oxygen in our blood is an issue. And it was measuring HRV, which we love, heart rate variability.
Heart rate variability, great thing to be able to measure. I know one of the interesting things that I saw, which is, again, why I want to talk about this, because I feel like it frustrates me because you guys hear it all the time on this podcast. I've got dysautonomia. What can I do? Well, there are a ton of things that we can start to do, and they're going to be hard, and they're going to take away some of your spoons. So it's going to be, it's not going to be fun. But when you're talking about this, I understand the frustration. Like, this is the list when it talks about of symptoms that you can get. Like, when it's your brain, fatigue, brain fog, migraines, vertigo, fainting, lightheadedness. When it's your heart, tachycardia, meaning your heart goes super high. Brachycardia, meaning it goes down. Palpitations, chest pain. It can affect your stomach, meaning nausea, vomiting, pain.
Decrease in appetite.
Bloating. It can affect your mouth, like dry mouth, tooth decay, difficulty swallowing. Your eyes, dry eyes, sluggish pupils, grayed out vision. It can make your skin dry, reduce sweating, increase sweating, frequent urination, pain during urination. Like, it just creates all these problems in the body.
I think it's really important with that to just note that's why these types of patients come in with multiple diagnoses or misdiagnoses, where it's like, now we're looking into it being dysautonomia because check this box, check this box, check this box, check this box.
Yes.
Like, yes, you have vertigo. Yes, you have brain fog. Yes, you have, gut issues. Yes, you're not sleeping well, like, and you're tired all the time. But like, how many doctors did you go see, or how many times did you go to your doctor to actually just have them try a whole bunch of things before you get to this quote unquote dysautonomia diagnosis where people don't really know what to do? And this other study I was looking at, super interesting. It was after a traumatic brain injury, and they were looking at, it was just a study where they just looked at, so it was based off of the doctor's notes, right? So take that for what it's worth. But 35 patients that were not diagnosed with dysautonomia, and then 35 patients that were. And it's really wild, the differences. And it doesn't, obviously there's no it doesn't really know why. Like, it's not able to say, well, these people had a central nervous system issue and these people recovered how we would typically think you would recover from a brain injury. But it was really interesting because they couldn't really figure out how to help the patients. It had a specific section on the drugs, like the pharmaceutical medicines that they were trying to use to help. And it was everything from, they said wide range of drugs was used in an attempt to control dysautonomic features, including chlorpromazine, clonidine, benzodiazepines, propranolol.
Yep.
There you go.
That's a migraine medication too.
yeah.
That's why I know.
I figured you're better with this stuff than me because most of your patients come on like a big cocktail. Hydralazine. Anyway, contrast with the control group, patients that were not dealing with dysautonomia. One was on chlorpromazine. That sounds right.
Clomeprazine.
That sounds right. And one was on...
Don't worry, y'all. I got this.
One was on haloperidol.
What? What?
Hold on. Hey, haloperidol? That might be right.
Yeah,
anyway,
haloperidol.
There it is.
It looks like it means one, basically. So it's like, we're going to use this fancy term because it's cool. Haloperidol.
My point...
In parentheses, it says one.
My point being, 28 patients in the control group did not receive any centrally acting agents, meaning 28 out of 35 didn't even need any sort of central nervous system, anything. Whereas in the 14 plus most of them in the dysautonomic group needed really intense medications in order to try to figure out what the central nervous system was doing. And so that was their best play, like their best guess about how can we help these people recover. And it didn't really do a whole lot of stuff.
Which also I just want to mention super quick. When we were laughing there, I don't want to make light of these things. Know that this is what happens when patients come in and they try to say these names and they talk about these things and they go into it. It's like, we're so damn lost that even trying to pronounce this shit gets you lost. And you're sitting over going, propofol.
Yeah, it's a different language. I mean, quite literally. It's not.
And I feel for our doctors that have to learn these new ones. Like, they're having stuff that's being thrown at them constantly with a new name and a new reason. Yeah. And guess what? That thing's going to have a mainstream name. It's going to have a generic name. It's going to have the whatever one that we've gone over here. Like,
pharmaceutical name.
I can only imagine trying to keep up with that shit.
It's like when you remember when you were in anatomy, or I don't know which class this was in, but when you had to do your science project and you had to learn like the species, the genotype, and it was like 5 different names for like human, Homo sapien,
phylum, genus, species.
That's it.
Yeah,
yes.
Order. Yeah. Phylum, order, genus, species.
Look at
something.
You.
Yeah, it's in there somewhere. Kingdom, right? What? Kingdom. Yeah.
Kingdom. Big Daddy Garrett.
I think it's like kingdom, phylum, order, genus, species is what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
That sounds right. I feel like that's what it is for the pharmaceutical world.
Take that, Mrs. Whatever. Yeah, you thought I didn't remember because I didn't remember on the test. Well, guess what? I remembered on this podcast. Where's my gold star?
That's funny. So the other one.
The other one what?
The other thing I was talking about, POTS and vasovagal syncope.
Right. And
hyperhidrosis, which is the massive amounts of sweating that we typically see whenever we have dysautonomia. It's interesting because it's such a chicken and the egg. Even in that study where they were trying to help these patients that were suffering from traumatic brain injury, and they were in a coma, right?
Which, by the way,
they weren't awake.
Boom, trauma. Like, we can take it back to where and what, and it's like we have a traumatic brain injury. If we cause trauma to the brain, we cause trauma to brainstem, spinal cord, neck, all these important structures that are inside of the body that when we cause damage to this, it creates issues. And what's interesting is you talk about like trying to figure this stuff out. There's a lot of people and studies. Like, remember the guy, so we always do a team meeting with all of our docs. Remember the concussion guy that we had come when we were in Naples? Like, to me, it was very interesting. One of the things that he gave me that I was like, ooh, like my brain works in a way that if you were going to try to create some sort of medication or something that would balance physiology, I can actually run that. I can run that path in my brain because I can understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Because he talked about whenever you have a traumatic brain injury, you release neurologically what's called GABA. GABA is basically, it takes away the...
It's like a pain.
It is.
Right? Because you can take GABA to reduce pain.
Yep. So it's meant for that. But what's interesting is neurologically, it makes your nervous system more rigid. So you're talking about a
rigid in a good way or a bad way?
In a bad way, to protect it because it's taken on trauma. It's like shaking it. So the body has a protective mechanism of releasing GABA in order to almost like harden and protect for a certain period of time. Yeah, an armor that's in the, like you have to give me a second when you're doing, I'll look it up in here because I know I have notes, but he explained like how it does that and this whole process. And I was like, well, then if you could have something post someone having a traumatic brain injury and you went down this route, like I kept trying to think biochemically, like what you would need and where you would try to go in order to inhibit that. And then part of me goes, but what does that matter? Like, here's what you have to realize is your body is an amazing self-healing organism. Sure, we can give it things and make sure that we've got all the things that we need and there is stuff. But if I would just be aware and give it what it needs post that and also not use old information. Like I've got a friend of mine, she's in Canada. She's a concussion specialist that works in physical therapy, and they do a lot of like state-of-the-art therapies for people that are just abnormal to what people would typically do. But a lot of times when it comes to concussion and when it comes to your kids playing sports and being at things, we're using old information. Oh my gosh, make sure you do this. Don't let them fall asleep. Don't do all these things. It's like that's old information that's not true. Like, yes, we need to be safe. We need to make sure that they haven't had any injuries. Like we could do stuff, but it's like trying to keep them awake is actually worse. Obviously, we need to rule out certain things before we put them to sleep because I get it. You're terrified. What if they go to sleep and don't wake up? I understand that. I can address and sympathize with you on that aspect. But there's an aspect of recovery that's like they need to sleep. They need to be able to go into this, rest state where we can actually go into some recovery neurologically. We also need to make sure we're giving them things that would be more anti-inflammatory. Like I know immediately any of the research we'll talk about, increase in your omega-3 fatty acids
Vitamin
immediately
C.
after that. Yes, vitamin C. There's so many things that you can do, but it's like we're just trying to figure out like, hey, I found this cool receptor here. And if you do this, it's like, I understand that. I get that that's cool. But it's like trying to peel back the layers and we only peel back like a couple and we didn't actually go deep enough to figure out like, well, what is that potentially caused? And then also what other ripple effect is created from that? Because we're typically like, oh, we get that back and these things are a little bit better, but then you tend to have residual effects.
That's what I was going to say. It's almost like trying to find this really, really sweet spot between what is the normal restorative mechanism that our body will naturally go into in order to repair. And at what point does that get off track and become abnormal to where we could then say, okay, here's a protocol, here's this thing, here's what you can do to take this to avoid the actual sustained injury, right? Because it's like, at some point it's like, okay, well, do we want to disrupt GABA or not?
Which, by the way, wrong. Let me go back and let me rewind that just a little bit. It's an increase in...
Check my notes.
It's an increase in glutamate being released. So you have to understand glutamate basically gets broken down. This is, by the way, this is what I had left in my brain of whenever we do biochemistry. Biochemistry was one of my favorite classes in chiropractic school. So when you talk about you have this trauma, and he was talking about it cool. leads to an increase in influx of potassium, which also brings in calcium with them as well whenever it does it. And so the calcium is what creates the rigidity within the system. Yes. And so this is where you start to have this problem, which I then also, so I started looking up stuff, and there's like some of these like NLRX-1.
Do you know what that stands for now?
And, I could probably, yeah, nucleotide binding oligomerization domain, leucine-rich repeating That's a great question. NLRX1 is an innate immune NOD-like receptor that inhibits the major inflammatory pathways. So this is actually your body's way of handling when this happens is it senses the increase in glutamate, so then it increases what's called GLT1 and GLAST, and that basically goes to what we talked about before, your lymphatic system, so the glial cells, the lymphatic system of your nervous system, to actually increase the action of those. And so I sit here and go, well, if we back that up further, what if we already haven't been sleeping well, which we know most people don't? What if we haven't been exercising? What if we haven't had, the best eating habits? What if we haven't done all these things? The conclusion is your body has an ability to be able to figure out and fix whatever this issue is.
Yeah.
Why is it not doing that?
Right. That's exactly where I was about to take this. Nice.
Boom. See, nerdy, lost you for a second, brought you right back.
Bring it
One
back.
sentence.
We're in the
Let's talk
same
about
brain.
sex. Just kidding.
What I was going to say before you said that. Wow.
Sorry. I'm loopy. I'm still nervous about the next episode, okay?
What happens if like why do some people why does it happen? Why does it happen to some people? I feel like that's what the answer isn't. It's just like, oh, you have central nervous system issues.
What the answer
Okay, but
isn't.
why?
What a great phrase.
Because you're not really telling me the information I actually need to know. It's like, yeah, I know my shit's fucked up. So but why and how? Where do we go? And so I think that's where upper cervical chiropractic can be very valuable. Functional nervous system testing can be very valuable. And anytime, if you've had any sort of trauma, any sort of traumatic injury, whether that's playing sports, you grew up playing sports, you roughhoused when you were a kid, you have specific instances where I got my bell rung, or I was in a car accident, or I did these things, or you had
repeated emotional traumas over your life.
I was to say, or in the case where you don't necessarily have a physical trauma, but you're experiencing all of these symptoms, it makes sense to go get a functional nervous system test so that you can see how well your brain and your body are currently talking. Because the fact of the matter is, when I was looking up this research, they called it a brainstem attack.
I'm telling you the amount of things: migraine, brainstem issue, this shit, brainstem issue. And it's like, then why aren't you figuring out the stuff that you can do? Why aren't you starting to connect these dots? Why aren't you fucking talking to us? Damn it. Probably because I said fuck and you don't want to work with me. That guy says fuck and talks about sex. We can't work with him.
And not just the stuff that they can do on their own to help their neuroplasticity, which is what we talk about a lot. Mm-hmm. Also, to find an upper cervical chiropractor that knows how to evaluate what your spine is doing. More importantly, what those top two bones are doing, because they literally protect your brainstem. So if we have a brainstem attack going on and we have this dysautonomia and all of these nervous system issues going on with the central nervous system, then we need to go to a practitioner whose expertise lies literally within that system.
So this is, I've constantly been trying to figure out how to explain this in a way that I think lands it the right way. And because I think what we do, it gets dumbed down to a level that doesn't actually speak to the level of specificity that we're doing and the impact that it can have on your body when we're talking about upper cervical chiropractic care. I lately, when I talk about, because we use what we call the biomechanical or the motion x-ray films to assess the biomechanics, the way that your spine moves, to figure out what it is that is causing this interference to your neuromechanics, the way that your nervous system is functioning. And we know the explanation I always give is we know how our wrist moves, we know how an elbow moves, we know how a shoulder moves, we know how to assess range of motion, we know how a knee moves, we know those things. It's true with your spine as well. Punjabi and White, we know the book. It's the one that we always go back to for all of our docs that do everything. They've assessed spinal biomechanics during lateral flexion, rotation,
when you move your head side to side.
When you move your head side to side, we know what's occurring.
Yes, no, yeah.
We know what is occurring there. The difference is, think about this, knee surgeries, hella common, right? Because my knee is in pain and we got to fix it. But I hate to tell you, there's not that many hella important neurological structures inside of your knee.
Very true.
There's not that many inside of your elbow. There's not that many inside of your shoulder, in the joint itself. It's still important.
There's receptors in the joint.
There's receptors.
That's about it.
But guess where they talk to? the
Right.
most damn important one, the one where almost every nerve in your body runs through in the upper cervical spine. And here's the problem.
The one that's fully encased in bone.
Yeah, you're talking about a system that's encased in fluid and bone in order to protect it because of how important it is. But oh, don't worry about that when you're getting migraines. That's not the problem. We'll just cut this nerve or inject it or give you this shit. Like, we're not going to keep going just a little bit deeper because it can't be that. It has nothing to do with that, clearly. There's nothing that we could do there. And here's what sucks. Sometimes they get really close. Like you have Chiari malformation or you have certain, neurological issues that are going on and they're like, I think I figured it out. There's too much pressure at the level of where the brainstem sits, which is where the upper cervical spine is.
So let's just cut off half those bones.
So we'll cut them out, which I'm with you. Okay, we could sort of track there. Question, doctor. There's an area in the upper cervical spine, so where we talk about the upper part of your neck. There's an area up there. There's actually 4 muscles that exist up there that don't exist anywhere else. They're called your suboccipital muscles. They're very, they are the most neurologically dense with neuronal fibers inside of them. Like it's like 280 something 280 something fibers per gram of muscle, which is like 100 to 200 times more than like most areas. Like,
yeah, it's like every muscle. Every muscle is smart because it has to tell your brain where it is in what space it's in, right? In relation to what you're doing. That's how your brain knows if you're going to fall so that your body can make really quick micro movements in order to keep you stable. And these muscles he's talking about in the upper part, the upper part in the back of your neck that connect your top 2 bones in your skull, they have more of these really smart receptors than any other muscle in your body by
so it's a lot. So I save this. It's in my favorites on my phone so that I can always use this because anybody who wants to ask, I'm like, okay, this is researchgate.net. I'm sure we could post it up and get it somewhere. This is density of muscle spindles per gram of muscle tissue. What's the inferior oblique, which is a muscle that basically you could look it up. Maybe we can put something on the screen. Who knows? Maybe Big Daddy will put something on there. But there's this we call it your suboccipital triangle. It's just this triangle of muscles, and they attach only to the top 2 bones of your neck. It's why we focus on that. It's so important. The inferior oblique muscle spindles per gram, 242. The superior oblique, 190. Rectus capitis posterior major, 98. Rectus capitis posterior minor, 98.
And then what is it?
And then longus coli, which is a muscle that's in the front of the neck, is 48. Your multifidi, which are little muscles that go in between all the vertebrae of your spine, are 24. Now let's just talk about some of the muscles that the Liver King likes to work out because we talked about this earlier. You guys have no idea. This is only a joke within the room. But the trapezius muscle, right? Those traps when you think of Goldberg, the wrestler, like the dudes that have those like bumps on their shoulder. Big ass muscles, right? Got to be super strong. Muscle spindles per gram, 2.2.
Yeah.
In comparison to 242 in these little tiny muscles that are only located at the base of my skull right here.
Yeah.
So, hey, doc, question for a second, because we understand what's going on here, but we also understand anatomy. If we cut those out, what's going to happen? The pressure will be gone. And you can look this up. There were studies that were done. They did this on people that were having, it was some of the first surgeries that they did whenever people were having Chiari malformation, which is basically your brain. They believe your brain being pulled down into your spinal cord, but in your spinal column. But there's a lot of different causes. When they did that, the people got relief immediately. Then not long after that, they started having grand mal seizures. Because your brain is not getting any information about where your head is at. So now we're overloading the system and it has no idea what's going on. And we go into a seizure because we do that. And it's like, and they were literally cutting off the back of the atlas, the top bone of your neck, and the back of the C2 in order to open up space and take pressure off. So
to wrap up our science lesson here, right? These muscles are super important.
30,000 foot view. Yes.
These muscles are super important. We could do something like cut off half of the bones in your neck to relieve pressure. Except what the other the other side of the coin with that is you have these really, really important smart structures in this same part of the spine that are designed for a very specific purpose. And if we cut what they're attached to, then we inherently F some other stuff up within our system.
I'll give you an explanation.
In the spirit of trying to fix this dysautonomic issue, we've tried a whole hell of a lot of things without a whole lot to show for it.
Yes.
Is my point. So why not upper cervical chiropractic?
Correct. If you were a car, because everyone can understand, everyone's driven a car, everyone understands that a car requires maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just imagine that you drive in because you have a flat tire. My tire is flat. And you want it fixed. And they take the tire off and they throw that shit in the dumpster and they give you your keys back and they say, fixed it. You don't have a flat tire there anymore. Dude, but I don't have a tire. This shit ain't going to drive. You said you did not want a flat tire anymore.
Yep.
I fixed that. It's doing the wrong solution with the right intention, but not enough information in order to do what we know is right for that case.
That's a good analogy.
Every once in a while I have some. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Big Daddy Garrett is giving applause. I'm sure you're all applauding in your car right now. You're like, oh, that's so great.
Got it.
I just want you to, first of all, be able to ask questions. If you can't ask questions to your doctor, by the way, we might have a new name for the podcast at some
Fire
point.
them.
Fire their ass because you suck. I'm firing your ass. I'm done with you. You don't align with what it is that I'm looking for. I'm done with you. I can't do a Donald Trump impression.
That makes me
What?
fire their ass. I'm done with you. I don't know why it just made me giggle.
Because that's what I want you to be able to do. I just want you to be able to be done with him and to say, okay, I'm just going to have an open mind about this. I'm going to ask questions and do your research. Any of my big time fans through my social media thought I was full of shit too, and then started to do their research and then started to test out some things that I recommend.
You're 100% right. I think to land this, it's we've got this dysautonomia becoming a buzzword. Nervous system regulation, nervous system whatever has been a buzzword for a while.
It's hot right now.
It's hot right now. Help your nervous system.
So hot right now.
It's so hot right now. Which is great because it's bringing awareness, except it's also not great because that means some people go to like a weekend-long certification thing in somatic healing and they think they're experts in the nervous system, and they're not. And so we need to be able to ask questions. We need to be able to trust who we're asking. And because when you do this work, Brandon and I talk about trauma all the time. Like, working with the nervous system, healing the nervous system is done in layers. You need to have somebody that, I always say, speaks the language of the nervous system and is fluent in that language and will then teach it to you, because it's not just something you learn in a weekend. It's something Brandon and I have studied for almost a decade. And so then if you're asking questions, the answers need to make sense, right? Mm-hmm. You need to be able to get answers to your question, and they need to be able to explain it to you in a way of, we're doing it this way because of X, Y, and Z. And then I expect this to happen. If it does, then we'll do this. If it doesn't, then we'll do this, right? Like there's a flow and there's a way to take care of these things. And you'll know you're in the right place when the doctor makes you feel, like literally makes you do this.
And all the pressure comes off the shoulders. And by the way, I realize that when it comes to science, I feel like we're like, oh, needs researcher, it's all bullshit. And it's like, well, science used to basically be that. I would create a hypothesis and say something, and we would test it to see if it would work.
Scientific method, what?
Holy
that
shit,
exists
what?
In today's world?
Kingdom, phylum, genus, species.
But I believe in science.
But where's your science? It's like, listen, woo-woo science club, that's what we're here for, is in order to do that. I'm technically testing that out right now with a shit ton of migraine patients. And right now, the information that I'm seeing is showing me that if you go this route, you're going to get the results that you want for a vast majority of people. I think the same is true when it comes to dysautonomia. But like Alex said, it needs to make sense, it needs to be logical, and it needs to not just be guesswork. Well, there's been some studies done, and this is the medication that they recommend, so we're going to go this route. And if that's the route that you want to try first, okay, let's do that. But let's have a plan. Where are we going after this? What are we doing? What's the next steps? And I think this is just a new thing for me. If your doctor is unwilling to work with other doctors, I think they're a piece of shit. It's just me. I'm willing to work with almost any doctor. That's fine. I have zero issues with that because I'm over here focusing on the neurological component. You may be the person that does the muscles. You may be the person that does the IVs. You may be the person that makes sure that everything else is functioning right. You may be, I don't care. That's fine. Because if you've got some serious shit going on and you're trying to figure this thing out, you might need all that.
You deserve experts in every field. And I will say, I just talked about this recently, actually. Ego doesn't belong in science. There should be no egos. So working with other doctors just means our whole goal is to get you better. And I could be wrong. They could be wrong. I could find something. They could find something. We need to add in this other person.
And we might have missed something.
In here. We might have missed something. We might need a difference in, a different perspective, a new set of eyes, whatever the case. And all that's great because guess what that means? Somebody's going to get better. So I agree. If you have a doctor that refuses to work with anybody or immediately shoots things down, definitely maybe time to go back to the drawing board.
So when it comes to this issue, this is how we'll land it. You invited everyone over for the 700th landing of this episode.
And we went back up. we came down.
And then I have one ask for you. We only have one ask at the end of this episode. When it comes to your health, it's like a dinner party that you're throwing. And
I love dinner parties.
You're only inviting over the people that you want to have there. And you get to determine who's at the table. You're not going to their table and you're like, hey, this is my room. And you're all get to, no. This is my life. This is my body. This is my experience. This is my health that we're talking about. So this is my fucking party. And you're coming to my party. And I'm going to determine whether you get to sit at this table or not. And sometimes you might have...
Talking about for your healthcare providers.
For your healthcare providers. It's I determine who gets to be here. My gym that I go to, I like you. Take good care of me. You've done this. You've changed my life. You get to be here. My general practitioner, I like you. You get to be here. My, Dr. Alex, who's my upper cervical chiropractor, who I've gone to all the ones, but man, she's amazing. She gets to be here because I know this. And guess what? They all get to work together. And then there's some asshat that doesn't want to work together and that they're trying to do all this. And they say all the other stuff that I've done is bullshit. And oh my gosh, why would you ever do that? That's terrible. Why are you not? And it's like,
they just made
you're not invited to the party.
All the time. You can't come. Can't sit with us.
You can't sit with us. Almost everyone can sit with us. You can't sit with us. And then guess what? They're going to throw a pity party and not like it and all that stuff. Sorry about you. Not sorry. You get to control. You're in control of that. I want you to be empowered to know it's your body. You're throwing the party. You get to control who's sitting there. So if I don't want you at my party, you don't get to come to my party.
Okay.
You can get over it. But seriously, one ask, the only ask that we have with this episode. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, because we always like
a dinner party.
No, we went like, oh, we're doing all the we normally
what's the ask?
hey,
What's the
do
ask?
all these things. All we want, share this episode with somebody. That's it. You don't gotta subscribe. You don't gotta do all the things. Just share this episode with a friend. It's going to be a shitstorm of a party, but it's going to be great. And hopefully there's something in there that they found.
Welcome to our dinner party episode.
Welcome to the Woo Woo Science Club. We're so glad that you're here.
We're serving dysautonomia. Healing.
Send this to your friends and say, hey, welcome to my party.
Can we be done?
Yeah, bye.